If you have a story you want to share with the channel, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to send it my way. And of course, thank you. When I was a lot younger, my family decided to take a vacation to North Carolina. They always tried to plan some kind of vacation out of state once a year during the summer, and this year it was to the beach and a national park. The theme was apparently nature, and to be more educational. My parents were always big on learning outside of school too, but they always made it fun, which I appreciated. Anyways, there were 5 of us total. My mom and dad, my younger sister, myself, the middle child, and my older brother. With 5 of us, they found it easier to get a hotel rather than camping, so that's where we stayed. It was a nice hotel, though. It had free breakfast where, sometimes, my older brother and I were allowed to walk down there together while they finished getting ready. Where other days, we just waited with them, depending on how long my brother wanted to sleep. The hotel also offered a few free snack vouchers a day, which was great. We were allowed to go and exchange them for something of our choice once daily. Being a young adult now, I can tell the hotel was very family-friendly. It had an indoor pool with a small one to the side for kids. The vouchers and free breakfast, of course, helped reduce the cost of meals and food you may have to pack too, so I can see why my parents chose it. What I didn't understand was why people went there and would get upset about seeing kids running around. I don't expect everyone to be patient or accepting of kids. I had siblings and now a couple nieces and nephews, but I don't want any kids myself. However, I can't imagine being angry at just seeing a kid around me, especially in public. However, there seemed to be one guy, probably about middle-aged, at the hotel where, no matter where he was or what he was doing, he seemed to have a permanent scowl on his face. I remembered him because he almost looked scary. I saw him in the pool, in the breakfast area, and even at the ice machine. He would look around, especially at me, and just look annoyed. I just did my best to avoid him. My first personal interaction that I'd had with him was in the pool. On this day, we got hit with a hellacious thunderstorm, so we stayed indoors. But we still wanted to have some fun, so the pool it was. He was in the hot tub alone when my family walked in. There were already a lot of people, adults and kids, in the swimming pool, and they were all playing, laughing, and screaming. My brother asked about going to the hot tub, which is when I looked over at it and noticed him there. My parents told my brother no, most likely because they saw the man in it and told him maybe he could later. So, we all got in the pool and enjoyed ourselves. The hot tub was closer to the entrance of the pool, so the guy was pretty close. After some time, I approached my mom, who was sitting near the entrance playing with my little sister, and I was telling her about something. I don't remember what happened, but something caused me to laugh. As I was laughing, the man in the hot tub got up, said something that I couldn't make out, and then left. But he looked angry. I remember asking my mom if he was okay, and she looked over at him and just shrugged, saying something about just being in a bad mood or something. The rest of the time in the pool went fine. But the worst of it was the next morning when we went to have breakfast. My brother wanted to sleep in some, so I had to wait for my parents to get ready so we could all walk down together. Once we got down there, I once again noticed the man from the pool sitting at the table in the back, reading a newspaper and drinking coffee. He didn't even have a plate in front of him. There were 2 other families sitting down there at the time. One of them had 4 kids with them, all close to our ages, and the other couple had a kid probably close to my age, and then an infant. The baby was starting to cry as they comforted them, and one of the kids from the other families was starting to whine about something else. We picked out a table and my mom sat with my little sister, while my dad took me and my brother up to the buffet to get our breakfast. When we returned, my mom went to get her and my sister's plate. I looked around the room as I do while I eat, and I noticed the man again. He was still sitting at the table with no food, but he had laid his newspaper down and was just staring at the family's table in anger. I looked away and tried not to think about it because he was pretty scary looking to my young self. As my family talked about our plans for the day, the man was a forgotten memory for the time being, and I asked to get seconds. My parents said that I could, as they could see the buffet line from where we sat, so I got up to get more. As I walked up, I noticed the angry man was also approaching, so I slowed my pace some to let him go ahead. However, he went past me, so I assumed he wasn't going to the food, so I went forward. But then, right as I walked toward the first container, the man shoved past me, nearly knocking into me, slammed open the container lid, used his hands to grab a biscuit, and then slammed it closed. I was a kid, and I at least knew better than to use my hands for the food. You were supposed to use the tongs to get the food. I was also standing in front of the same container. It was pretty obvious that I was trying to use it, so he could have left it open, but he was rude and he shut it on me. But, again, I was a kid, and I certainly wasn't going to say anything, so I slowly opened the lid again and got my food. The man was now towards the other end getting more coffee. I finished making my plate when I heard my brother call my name. He asked me to grab him a biscuit too, so I went back to grab another one. As I turned around to head back to the table, the man once again cut me off, but this time he was too close, causing us to collide, and spilling my biscuits and gravy all over both of us. A majority of it got on his shirt and pants, but some of it got on my hand and arm and burned me a little. The entrance wasn't that big. I was in the center, sure, but I was also trying to be very careful while carrying my plate. The man was not close enough to the entrance. He was still making his coffee and getting whatever else he had, so he should have waited for me to pass. However, much like the lid thing with him cutting me off, it seemed like he was just trying to be an ass and cut some little kid off, taking advantage of his authority. However, that did not work in his favor as he was now wearing my food. I immediately gasped and my eyes started to water. This man scared me as is, but when I looked up and saw that he was red in the face, I tried to hold back and apologize to him, but he immediately started yelling at me and pushed me back. He made a comment about me being stupid and not paying attention, which, of course, got my parents to take action. My dad immediately went into protector mode and got up to come over to me. He asked me if I was okay or hurt, and I said that I wasn't, so he told me to go back to the table, and I did, now full-on bawling. And the whole time, this man was yelling at my dad, saying some pretty hurtful things about us being stupid, about being not well-behaved, and that I even needed an ass-whooping for spilling my food. My dad put his hand out trying to reason with the guy and apologize, but the guy wasn't having it. He continued to get louder until my dad eventually said something to him about needing to calm down. Apparently the guy didn't want to hear this because, as my dad turned around to just leave the situation, the guy punched my dad, knocking him to the ground. I screamed and called for him, and I watched as my dad tried to get up, but this guy was nearly on top of him, wailing on him. The other family's kids were screaming, we were screaming and crying, and I didn't know what to do. I was still very young. I was terrified that he was going to kill my dad, and that it was going to be all my fault. Thankfully, there are good people out there, and two men interjected to pull the angry guy off of my dad. They held him down and yelled for someone to get help, but the hotel staff had already come over after hearing the commotions. They called the cops. The guy was arrested and kicked out, and they almost kicked us out, but the other families were great witnesses and explained to the staff what had happened, convincing them that we did not provoke this guy, and that my dad didn't even lay a finger on him. After everything calmed down, we went back to our room with the day and mood practically ruined. And not to mention me, a young child, thinking that it was my fault, too. I felt like if I was just a little more careful, I could have avoided all of this. But over time, especially, replaying it all in my head and comparing it to what my brother saw as he witnessed it, it wasn't my fault. The guy had been off to the side, looking at the containers of sauces and jelly. My brother said that he watched him look up at me, drop the jelly he had in his hand, and then walk towards me. We both saw him turn sideways, making a conscious effort to squeeze past me, but the space that he had was not big enough for him. He turned too quickly, and he caught my plate, causing the whole thing to spill. This was a grown man doing this, and then he tried to blame it on a child? Who does that? What grown man enjoys going off on a child like that? And not to mention he was violent with a complete stranger. I kind of understand being annoyed maybe about kids screaming and crying, but my family wasn't even doing any of that. We were taught to have very good manners, especially in public, inside voices and so forth. So why get mad at a random uninvolved family? I feel like he was just fishing for a reason to go off. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit at this point, but the bottom line, this man gave me nightmares, and everywhere we went for that trip and the rest of that summer, I was traumatized. I didn't want to go anywhere without my dad, and I didn't want him to go anywhere alone, feeling like I needed to protect him. I still have a slight phobia of being alone with strangers, but I have gotten better. Just a few words to that man. I hope that you got some help, because that reaction was not normal. Oh, and I hope that we never meet again. A few summers ago, my girlfriend and I took a road trip along the coast. We wanted to see the Atlantic Ocean, and I wanted to take her to see the lighthouses as she was obsessed with them. She lived in Mass as a kid and remembered going to one with her dad, but they moved to the Midwest when she was young, and had never been back. I had never been to the East Coast, so I thought it would be fun for both of us. We made a whole road trip out of it, driving all the way up. Nothing but the trip itself was planned. Once we got there, we found a good hotel and booked it for a few nights. We went sightseeing around town that day. We explored some local stores and diners. We went to a museum and just had a leisurely day. The next day, we went to the beach and looked around for lighthouses. With some online maps and a site dedicated to lighthouses you can enter, or explore, we narrowed down a few that we wanted to check out, hoping to find the one that she would remember from her childhood as well. We actually did get to see the lighthouses, and one of them was the correct one, too. The beach was wonderful. The lighthouses were better than I expected. The view from them was outstanding, and I could understand her obsession with them now. The trip was going smoothly, and we both were having a wonderful time. We checked out of the hotel, and before heading home, we circled around a little further north, wanting to stop at another place on our list. As we headed in that direction, we spotted another lighthouse, but this one looked old and possibly abandoned. We also enjoyed a little bit of urban exploration, so we agreed that we should check it out too. We stopped in the parking lot at a nearby beach, and we walked to it. We walked through the sand, seeing it was clearly not as popular as the others we had seen. There was some trash scattered around, some items like beach toys left behind, and some other random detritus. It certainly piqued my interest. What could cause a whole beach to be abandoned or go unused? But pushing that thought aside, we finally reached the lighthouse, and we could really tell that it was not in use. The entrance merely had a piece of plywood barely covering it, but it wasn't bolted or screwed down. You could easily pick it up and place it right back down. After not seeing any trespassing signs, we went in and checked it out. It was definitely neglected. The walls seemed to be peeling in some places, crumbling or cracked in others. The stairs to the top even looked kind of rickety, but stable enough to climb. At least, stable enough for us to try. We got to the top, and it was just as worn down as we saw from below. The sight was still nice, however. We could see the ocean and the reflection of the sun on the water. There was even a slight chill that afternoon, which just made the day perfect. But then I noticed something that caught my attention. In the back, behind the staircase, there was a sleeping bag and a large backpack. We didn't notice it when we first came up because the staircase spiraled and the items were behind us. So it was obvious that someone had been sleeping there, and that wouldn't normally bother me. But what did cause worry was seeing that there was a plastic cup and a bottle of alcohol sitting next to it, and the cup still had liquid in it. Someone was there recently. Whether it's a house or just someone finding shelter wherever they could, it was natural for someone to become defensive over their stuff. I didn't want to risk running into whomever this belonged to and causing problems. So I told my girlfriend, Maria, that we needed to go, and she agreed. We quickly and cautiously walked down the stairs, but were startled by a man standing right outside the lighthouse. Maria gasped, and he gave us a toothless smile and said in a gravelly voice, "It's a nice view up there, ain't it?" We both gave nervous smiles and agreed with him, and I apologized for going in without asking. He started shaking his head in a dismissive way, the way you do when you're telling someone it's not a problem. But then he stopped and he looked us up and down. "Tell you what," he said to us, "I'll let you all go if you do something for me." He pulled out a wad of cash and held it up to me. "I'll give you this money if you let me have some alone time with your pretty little friend there." He looked right at Maria with a creepy grin. I was horrified by what he had just suggested and said. He would let us go? As if he was keeping us there. I stepped further in front of her and told him, "No effing way, dude," holding my hand out to keep him back. But before I could turn back to Maria and tell her to start walking back, the man pulled out a knife and said, "Well, I wasn't really asking," and started walking towards us. I wasn't much of a fighter, but I have learned some things over the years. I went in motioning like I was going to punch him, and since he was focused on my arm, I was able to kick him in the shin, knocking him off guard, but not before he brought the knife down and cut my arm open. I then pushed him backwards, causing him to fall on his back, and of all things to do in that situation, the guy started laughing. But not even his laugh sounded normal. It was almost like a sinister or evil laugh. Maria tugged at my arm, so we left him there and took off back to our car. When we got to the car, we started cleaning up my arm and realized that it wasn't that deep at all. I kept a first aid kit in the trunk for emergencies such as this. Being stabbed by a homeless guy. We pulled it out and just put some gauze on it, which was fine. I mentioned reporting it to the police because not only was he violent, but who knows what he would have tried to do to me, or worse, Maria, if I hadn't fought back. However, Maria said that we should just let it go, mentioning we may have been trespassing too. I wanted to respect her wishes though, so we never reported it. We left there thankful to be in one piece, but still made some great memories and took some wonderful pictures as well. I just won't be going to any more abandoned lighthouses, if we ever go back. I just mowed the grass, and it's 80-something degrees Fahrenheit outside. You should subscribe to the channel. This happened about a decade ago, when I was in my early 20s, but the memory of it still kinda gives me the creeps. At the time, my college friends and I had put our money together to rent a remote cabin in the middle of nowhere, in Kentucky, during our summer break. We were looking forward to escaping the city, throwing back some beers and just getting to party without neighbors or the authorities putting a stop to it. Once we got there, we knew the seclusion part was accurate. The closest town almost an hour away, and we were surrounded by a dense forest. Don't get me wrong, none of this was a negative either. It was exactly what we wanted. The 6 of us got in and started calling dibs on the sleeping arrangements immediately. The first few days passed without incident, or at least without ones that we didn't cause. Clayton got a little banged up trying to climb a tree, but otherwise we were good. On the 3rd night, though, things started to change. It was between 3 and 4 in the morning. We had all had our share of drinks and were passed out all over the place. I was sleeping in a small and uncomfortable, I should add, fold-out cot in the living room. Because of this, I was in that hazy space between wakefulness and sleep when I heard the distinct sound of footsteps. It was a patterned thud, thud, thud that told me that it had to be somebody walking. The floors in the cabin were all wooden, or maybe the fake vinyl stuff, so you could tell when someone was walking around versus on carpet. But when I didn't hear the water running or toilet flushing, or even see the light from the fridge kick on, I started to look around to see where it was coming from. To my surprise, it seemed like it was coming from outside. Like I said, I wasn't fully awake, so I started questioning myself. Did someone go outside when I wasn't looking? Clayton and JP both smoked, but they went outside to do it, so maybe that's who it was. I was too tired to give it any more attention, so I just tried to fall back asleep. But shortly after, I heard what sounded like someone jiggling the doorknob, as well as a weird, metallic scraping sound. I admit, becoming a little annoyed, I thought that one of them had locked themselves out, so I got up to open the door for them. I unlocked the door and went to swing it open, but nobody was there. I looked down both sides of the porch and saw nothing. I went back in, locked the door, and saw that JP was actually passed out on the couch, and Slim was on the floor. Clayton, Xavier, and Liam were in the bedrooms and the doors were all closed, so I assumed that they were in their rooms. The bathrooms were even open and the lights were off, so from my perspective, it looked like everyone was asleep. Confused and tired, I just went back to my cot and passed out. The next morning, we were all groggy and just talking about the previous night and that day's plans. Something reminded me of my experience, so I asked the group who was messing around outside. They all stared at me confused. I explained what I had heard, and none of them had admitted to it. The 3 in the room said that they were in there all night. Slim said that he hadn't heard anything, which I could believe because he was out pretty hard, not even budging when I shut the door. JP said that he thought he heard something, but he also thought that it was just in his head, or that he was having a dream. I'm pretty sure he heard what I had heard, but was also too asleep to be bothered by it. So it really was just me that heard it, but yet everyone was in their place. So who could have been out there? Ultimately, I just had to let it go. I wanted to enjoy my trip and not get wrapped up in something that wasn't important. For all I knew, it could have been an animal that I had spooked when I was unlocking the door. We enjoyed the rest of the day, however. We hiked, we went into the town to refill our food and drinks, and found some other entertainment. Later that night, we made a fire in the pit out back and tested what we could all cook under the fire to eat. It was entertaining, to say the least. We were already a few drinks deep and having a good time when I started getting this weird feeling. I felt like I was being watched, like I was being preyed on. I looked around the tree line but didn't see anything, and all my friends were still in their spots by the fire. I didn't know how to explain this to my friends, so I just kept it to myself, keeping an eye on my surroundings. I thought maybe I was just being paranoid from the alcohol and the memories of the prior night. We finished up at the fire, put it out, and then went inside to go to bed. We all got into our designated spots. This time Slim slept on the lazy boy instead of the floor, though. I once again had troubles, drifting in and out of consciousness, so I thought I would just go take a hot shower to clear my head and help me sleep. I grabbed some things from my bag when I once again started hearing the footsteps. I stood straight up and remained in place, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. And once again, it had to be coming from the porch. I slowly approached the door again, hoping to open it before they would have time to react and catch them in the act. But the only problem with that was that the deadbolt made a significant click when locking and unlocking it. By the time I reached the door, the metallic scraping noise had started again. I slowly turned the deadbolt, balancing it as much as I could to avoid the clicking, and I thought I must have done pretty well because the scraping noise hadn't stopped. As it continued to speed up, I grabbed the doorknob and quickly swung it open. There was a rush of cool air that forced its way inside the door, but otherwise, there was nothing on the other side. No person, no creature, nothing. At that time, I ran out the door and walked all the way around the cabin, looking around the trees too. But I found nothing. There was no way they could have gotten away fast enough for me to not spot who or what it was. It didn't make any sense in my head. By the time I got back to the cabin, JP was standing in the doorway and asked me what I was doing. I explained again what I had heard, but that whatever it was took off. He mentioned that he had actually woken up to the scraping sound as well. However, when he heard it and woke up, the door was already standing open, and he didn't know what was going on. That meant that he heard the sound while I was outside. So how could whatever it was get away fast enough for me to not see them, but then hide and come back to do it again? And how did JP not see them with the door open? We just went back inside, confused but trying to rationalize what it could be, until he finally fell asleep and I continued with my shower plans. The next day was our last one there, and we were going to be packing up and taking our stuff with us to whatever it was we decided to do that day. As we started leaving, I was the last one out, and as I stood by the cabin door resting my hand on the knob, it occurred to me that it felt rough. Doorknobs typically have smooth metal. I looked down at the knob, and to my surprise, it was scratched to hell. There were huge gashes all across the knob and the deadbolt. Something was obviously scratching at it. That's what made me realize what the sound was that I had heard the previous night, but then that started spiraling into more questions. If this was a person, then they were trying to break in. But why go to this cabin of all places? As mentioned, it was in the middle of nowhere. It's not like it was a row of houses to choose from, but then I thought, if this was a person, what could they have been using? Because the marks appeared to be evenly spaced, not like a single line from a screwdriver or a knife, or maybe even a crowbar. There were 4 parallel lines scratched all over it, like fingers or claws. So then, was it not a human? Was it something in the woods that was trying to get into the cabin? I nearly lost it, finally having proof of what I had been hearing, and called all my friends over. They all looked it over, and JP was the first to agree with me, confirming he woke up to the sound as well. We all agreed that it must have been something in the woods, but what? And why? I couldn't think of anything that could leave claw marks like that. Not to mention something that was fast enough to get away in the time it took me to open the door, but was also willing enough to go back to the door to do it again, with the door open right in front of the view of others. And if JP was being honest about hearing it, which I don't know why he would lie about it, then how could he have not seen it? This obviously disturbed me, thinking I had left the door wide open, and if the thing didn't run away, then there was a chance that it could have tried to attack my friends, and I couldn't live with the thought of putting my friends in that situation. everyone else just shrugged it off, but it was something that I found myself thinking about a lot. I wanted to know what it was, why they did it, and what was it capable of. It's still something that lives rent-free in my mind, wondering how close to danger we may have actually been. Because, ultimately, the fear of the unknown is absolutely real. So that, my friends, was a collection of some summer vacation stories that happened on vacation in the summer months. Summer vacation, summery month vacation. The summary of the vacation is that it happened in the summer. It was a summary. Anyways, summer vacation stories that happened on vacation in the summer months. Hopefully you all enjoyed these stories, and hopefully you all have something planned for the summer, if you're in the, of course, part of the hemisphere that, I almost said celebrates, but, experiences summer in these months. If you're not, well, then you are in the part of the world where it's currently winter, and these stories are a little less contextually relevant to you right now. But whenever it starts to get warm there, you can go back to my channel here, come back to my channel, find these stories and listen to them again, and they will once again be contextually relevant. See? That's called evergreen content. Content that is relevant no matter when the listener listens. My content is evergreen. Because it doesn't matter if you listen to these summer vacation stories in the summer of 2027. My god, I will be 36 that year. Anyways, it doesn't matter if you listen to it then, or if you listen to it today. It's still relevant in some way, shape, or form. Love it. Anyways, hopefully you all enjoyed these stories. If you did, please do consider hitting that thumbs up button. Throw an interaction my way. Just let me know that you appreciated the stories. If you didn't, well, I'm sorry to hear that. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing. That would be awesome. You can also go down below the video to the comments. Let me know how you're doing, what's going on, what your summer plans are, if you got any. If not, that's totally cool. I don't think we have any either. We're just trying to not not die of heat. Welcome to 2024, I suppose. Just trying to stay cool. That's about all we're gonna do. Yeah. Anyways, you can also join Patreon memberships to get early access to content like this and other things, depending on what you sign up for, how you sign up, which tier you sign up for. Or you can do a super thanks, which is just a tip to the channel, never expected, but always appreciated. All that said, friends, hope you're having a beautiful week. So far, beautiful weekend. It's Saturday. Beautiful day. And hope I see you again here very soon. But until then, remember, you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And until next time, my friends, much love and sleep well.